Welcome to the Prepper Almanac. Thank you for joining us today. It is deeply appreciated. In today's video, we are going to discuss how to survive the collapse and how to drought-proof your doomsday plot. This is one of the top skills that you'll need as a prepper, as water can become very scarce in a societal collapse. We'll go through a lot of facets of this specific skill in this video. Then at the end of the video, we'll direct you to 15 more important skills you will need and can trade after the collapse. But let's discuss today's first, and how to drought-proof your crops. Droughts are becoming a more frequent and severe problem. What used to be occasional long-term events are now happening more often, with some areas experiencing crippling dry spells lasting weeks or even months. The impact of this is far-reaching. Some regions are seeing more intense storms while others are baking under relentless heat and drought. Preppers can learn from this, and for those trying to grow a survival garden, this means facing the heartbreaking possibility of dead or dying plants. Watering is the obvious solution, but as we'll discover, it's not always straightforward. Fortunately, there are clever, practical ways to beat the drought. We'll explore techniques inspired by regions that have long battled dry conditions like Australia, the Middle East, and Africa. These methods combine simple science with a deep understanding of nature's rules. Whether you're preparing for a potential societal collapse or just want to safeguard your survival prepper garden, these tips will help you keep your plants thriving even when the weather turns against you. Let's get to some of these tips. And after watching the video to the end, let us know if you have additional tips we should be considering. Compost for preppers. The quality of the soil in any garden is typically its most critical success factor. A proper soil composition not only encourages healthy and deep root growth, but provides a balance of nutrients and, just as important, excellent water retention properties. The loamy soil that is the result of composting has all of these characteristics and will not only encourage healthy and robust plant growth, but hold and distribute moisture to plants evenly and over a period of time. You can buy compost, but most avid preppers have their own compost heaps and regularly add new compost to their gardens. Soil makes all the difference to overall plant health, so compost, compost, compost. As always, think smart and plant wisely. Some of us like to plant in neat rows with a disciplined line of vegetables growing straight and narrow. That might not be the best idea in times of drought. A large group of plants or blocks will offer a large clump of shade to the surrounding soil. This will hold in the moisture and protect the shallow roots from any heat generated at the surface of the soil. When you plant flowers and vegetables in concentrated clumps or groups, the shade from their leaves also protect the neighboring plants, much like a shade cloth or overhanging tree branch. This ability of plants to protect each other was one of the reasons the Three Sisters idea about planting emerged. The Three Sisters is an ancient Native American approach to gardening that involved planting corn, beans, and squash in close proximity. The corn roots run deep, the beans run wide and shallow, and the squash run in between. Each one of the Three Sisters also offers shade to each other, and the beans actually return nitrogen to the soil, feeding the corn and the squash. Next on our list is to grow drought-tolerant plants. Another step towards planting wisely is to select plants that will tolerate drought conditions. If drought is on your mind, choose the plants that will endure times of sparse rain or a total dependence on your ability to water the garden. What's important is to make informed decisions about what you plant. If you are in an area subject to drought or are concerned that it will become a future pattern, start thinking about those plants that can tolerate some level of drought. Most of these plants have deep root systems and are naturally tolerant of short periods without water. Some drought-resistant vegetables are peppers, the smaller the better in this instance, cucumbers, Roma tomatoes, mustard greens, Swiss chard, even asparagus after the plant is established and into their second year. Melons, squash, bush beans, okra, rhubarb, and potato varieties, as they are highly drought-tolerant once the plant is established. Let's switch gears now to smart watering. The obvious solution to any prepper garden threatened by drought is to water it. That can be easier said than done depending on your water situation. In some parts of the country and even the world, water is becoming a scarce and valuable commodity. Another fact is that some of us pay for municipal water. If you want to see your water bill go through the roof, try watering large gardens every day. On the other hand, some of us have well water, and while this gives us a relatively cheaper supply of water, we still have the electric bill for running a high-wattage water pump. Worse, some wells run dry, especially in times of drought. The best overall approach is to water intelligently. That means watering in ways that don't waste water and ensure the plant gets the most benefit. Some of the most effective ways to water smart is to use watering cans that can specifically direct the water to the plant, soaker hoses that keep the water underground to reduce evaporation from exposure to the air, and even improvised drip irrigation systems to constantly deliver water to a garden. Timing is another factor. Try to avoid watering in the midday heat of the sun unless a plant is wilting badly. Morning is the best time for watering, and make sure you water deep to encourage deep root growth. Evening is another good time for watering, but try to avoid getting water on the leaves in the evening. That can lead to the development of fungus overnight. That's another good argument for soaker hoses. Finally, try to avoid spraying your water. This is hard for some of us because that's the way we've always watered everything. The problem is that much of the spray is lost as vapor to the air. This is especially true on very hot and dry days. Spraying also tends to cover the leaves of plants when we really want to water at the base of the plants, so as much water gets into the soil as possible. As we mentioned, spraying the leaves also increases the chance of fungus forming on the plants, especially at night. Use a watering wand and water the base of the plant, and at least avoid using a lawn sprinkler which casts a significant amount of water into the air and on the leaves. Now let's discuss the power of mulch. Next to composting, mulching can make a big difference in a drought-tolerant garden. Think of it as the armor protecting your soil and plant roots from the onslaught of a merciless sun. Mulching not only keeps the weeds down but is critical to water retention in garden soil. Just as important, it protects the shallower roots from the intense heat of the topsoil exposed to heat. The standard recommendation is for a 2 to 6 inch layer of mulch, but that's determined a lot by the nature of the mulch. Fine mulch like grass clippings, shredded leaves, pine needles, compost, sawdust and wood shavings can be applied in thinner layers in the 2+ inch range. Coarser mulches like twigs, bark, straw and wood chips should be applied in a thicker topping up to 6 inches deep. All organic mulches will eventually decompose, adding nutrients to the soil, but will need to be topped off as decomposition occurs. There are also non-organic mulches like stone, chopped bits of rubber tire, and plastic films that can serve to retain moisture and keep down weeds. Be careful of the color though. Darker colors will absorb the sun's rays and raise temperatures, and even though the mass or composition of the mulch may retain moisture, a dark color can raise the temperature. Look for lighter or neutral colors when mulching. That pretty much rules out chopped up rubber tires, which doesn't sound like a great idea anyway. Let's now pivot to the art of shade. It seems counterintuitive to put your garden in the shade, but when the sky is constantly hot and dry, it helps to give your plants a break. The morning and early evening sun is the gentlest, so shade during the hot midday sun is ideal. That may seem hard to do if your garden is out in full sun and you're waiting for a tree to grow, but there are other solutions. One solution is a shading screen using shade cloth that you can erect between your garden and the sun. It will still allow some of the sun's rays through to keep photosynthesis at its peak, but will diminish the withering direct sunlight hitting your plants. You can buy shade cloth or improvise it from rough burlap or any other cloth or material that has a large, loose weave. You want to block some of the harsh rays of the sun but not all of the sunlight. How about creating a wicking bed? Tired of chasing away the garden hose, dreaming of a lush, thriving prepper garden without the constant watering? Well, get ready to roll up your sleeves and discover the magic of wicking beds. Born in the sun-baked heart of Australia, this ingenious gardening technique is a game-changer for beating the drought. Imagine a raised garden that practically waters itself. For preppers, this is the ultimate. A wicking bed is like a self-watering oasis for your plants. We're talking about a raised garden with a secret weapon, a hidden reservoir at the bottom. This water wonderland is filled with a special blend of peat moss, compost and soil that acts like a super-absorbent sponge. This incredible soil mixture literally sucks up water from the reservoir and delivers it directly to your plant's thirsty roots. It's like having a built-in hydration station for your garden. Creating a wicking bed is a bit of elbow grease, but the rewards are huge. Less watering, healthier plants, and a garden that thrives even in the toughest conditions. Now let's state the obvious next. The art of directing drainage to your survival garden. Making the most of the occasional rainwater is easier than you think. Most homes have gutters that funnel rain directly onto the lawn. Let's redirect that precious resource to where it's needed most, your survival garden. A quick and easy way to do this is by using gutter extensions to direct the water towards your plants. For larger-scale water collection, rain barrels are a fantastic option. Store rainwater in these barrels and use it during dry spells. To efficiently deliver water to your garden's roots, consider using soaker hoses. These hoses are buried in the soil and release water slowly, minimizing evaporation. By implementing these simple techniques, you can significantly reduce your water consumption while keeping your garden thriving. Let's switch gears to drought-proofing containers. Container gardening can be tough during a drought. The small amount of soil in a container dries out quickly in hot weather. However, with the right strategies, you can still enjoy fresh produce even in the most arid conditions. Regular watering is essential, but it can be time-consuming. To conserve water and reduce evaporation, consider creating a mini wicking bed system, which we discussed earlier. This involves placing a water reservoir at the bottom of your container to provide a steady supply of moisture to the roots. Additionally, using a drip tray and high-quality soil can help retain moisture. Monitoring soil moisture is crucial. A hygrometer can help you determine when to water, preventing overwatering or underwatering. And remember, moving your containers to a shady spot during the hottest part of the day can significantly reduce water loss. While container gardening presents unique challenges in drought conditions, it's still a viable option for growing your own food. With careful planning and attention, you can successfully cultivate a thriving container garden, even in the harshest climates. Now let's look at container gardening in a different scenario. It can be a great way to conserve water in potted plants. It's an ideal setup for a patio garden if you live in an apartment or townhouse. The idea is that the pots are stacked one on top of another in balanced tiers, and any water that drains from the top pots will drip into the pots underneath. Shallow water dishes are under the bottom pots to hold any extra water. If you add a good wicking soil that we described in wicking beds, you can even create some upward migration of moisture from the water in the bottom trays. This setup will require some degree of regular watering, but it's a smart way to conserve water and grow plants in a limited space. Now to the topic of stripping the leaves before the harvest. This is hard for some people to do, but certain vegetables like tomatoes, peppers, and even squash varieties should have some of their leaves stripped after the green vegetables begin to grow. This will direct more water to the fruits rather than to the leaves. Don't strip all of them, but about half. If in doubt, experiment on a few of the early fruiting plants and see how they do. Chances are you'll get larger fruits if the plant can direct more water to ripening fruit rather than growing leaves. The thing to remember is that when you see big green tomatoes, start stripping some leaves. Now let's review growing indigenous plants. Many of the flowers and plants that we grow are not native to the area where we live. This makes them susceptible to all manner of challenges from disease to pests and especially drought. One way to beat the system is to plant flowers and vegetables that are indigenous to the Western Hemisphere historically. And no, they're not all weeds. Even wheat is an indigenous wild grass. In fact, all flowers and vegetables came from somewhere. Also, avoid new plantings. A period of drought is a lousy time to plant something new. Young plants are fragile and usually require a lot of water and prefer ideal conditions. A drought is far from ideal. The best thing is to simply wait for the drought to pass. The only alternative is to use many of the techniques we've discussed in today's video and hope for the best. As we wrap up today's video, if you have any questions or if there are any topics that you would like discussed in the future, let us know in the comment section below. We love to get video ideas from the community, and let us know what you think of today's video as well. We always appreciate input. Be sure to like today's video and subscribe to the channel to learn more about prepping and share the video with others that may have a passion for prepping or are curious about prepping in general. As I mentioned earlier, today's video was about a particular skill. The next video, which you'll see in the top left-hand area of your screen, will continue the discussion and have 15 more important skills that you'll need after a societal collapse to build on today's discussion. Thanks for tuning in today. It's appreciated.